Hey, FemFreq Radio heads. Pandemic Summer 2.0 has wound down. Now that it's fall, it's time for you to snuggle up with the feminist pop culture analysis you can only get from your good friends at Feminist Frequency Radio. And you know what would make everything even more cozy? Cuddling up with the community of listeners and supporters over on Patreon. Subscribers get early access to new episodes, bonus content, merch discounts, listener polls, and the occasional surprise treat. But when you sign up on Patreon, you won't just be supporting our feminist media analysis. You'll also be giving real, tangible support to our incredible games and online harassment hotline, which is our free, confidential, text message-based emotional support hotline. Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak to sign up now.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge actually came on to clean up, which I think is delightful.
I don't.
She's because she's amazing. I don't know what she
is amazing, but I could see her fingerprints on parts of the script and some of the jokes, and I just thought, man, these are not landing for me, but we'll get into it.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by the gorgeous black woman who's planning to take over my 00 designation, Ebony Adams.
You're a dinosaur. You're a relic. You're past it. Go back to your beachfront property in Jamaica and fish, old man.
I believe it was Dame Judi Dench who once said to James Bond that he was a misogynist dinosaur. So That's cool. Mm-hmm. On today's episode, we're going to chop it up about No Time to Die, the 25th installment in the long-running James Bond Wankfest, and our goodbye to Daniel Craig as the titular badass. Stay tuned.
James Bond, licensed to kill, in love with Madeleine Swan. I could be speaking to my own reflection. Only your skills die with your body. And life is all about leaving something behind, isn't it?
Hello, Ebony.
What's up, Anita?
We got a real special guest today.
We have a very special guest today. I can't wait to talk to them again.
Joining us today is the coolest creative director and writer, musician, and games person we know, Teddy Dief.
Hi.
Hey.
You're
What's
special.
Up?
I'm making hand motions.
It's podcast relevant. Podcast visual.
You know what's super podcast relevant? We're not on camera, so I can't see for myself. Teddy, what do your nails look like today?
They're bare. I've stripped them and then I was too busy to reapply. So
unacceptable. Let's stop recording so that Teddy
can go get
their nails done.
What's up, Teddy?
You know, we're recording this on a Monday, so I've got energy.
Do you?
Can you tell? I've got nice post-weekend voice. I've got a nice great voice for radio. As I say. Yeah. I don't know. I've been making a game and being outside while the remaining days of summer are with us.
Amazing.
Love it.
It is Monday, so therefore I am tired. But when do I ever record this podcast not being tired?
Or when are you ever not recording the podcast but not tired?
Isn't that what I said?
No, what I'm saying is you're tired all the time, not even when you're just recording the podcast.
Oh, that is true. That is a true statement. Everyone, I would just like to celebrate myself in that I prepared for this podcast for the first time ever.
Good, because I didn't.
Yeah.
I watched many James Bond movies this weekend.
Why?
I watched 4 James Bond movies in a 24-hour period of time.
Did you just watch the previous Daniel Craig ones?
Well, okay, here's what I did. First of all, bless Teddy, because I was like, I have to go see this movie on this specific day at this specific time. Do you want to go with me and also be on the podcast at this specific day at this specific time? And they were like, yes, I have nothing else to do. That's not true at all. You have lots of things to do, but you happen to be free in those moments.
Yeah.
So we watched that. I didn't know anything about the James Bond universe. It's not something that I followed it's not something that I followed like the Marvel universe, right? Where I'm like, well, I'm going to watch it anyways. Just James Bond is something that we all know, but I didn't really keep up with all those movies. Yeah, we all kind of just
swim in the water in which, James, but you knew M or Q, right? You were aware of the, okay, cool.
100%. But I didn't know that the Daniel Craig franchise of 5 movies was like the movies are interrelated, right? Like there are some recurring characters, there's references to things from previous movies. None of that matters. You can watch this last movie without knowing any of it, and it's as incomprehensible as anything else, like as any other Bond movie. But I don't know. I kind of got curious about James Bond, and I like got home from the movie and I started reading through Wikipedia, and I was like, oh, these are all the different iterations and how people reacted to the different actors playing James Bond over the years. Like I kind of went down a James Bond rabbit hole, which is weird because James Bond is kind of trash, you know? Like I was like, is this really where I want to put all my energy? So anyways, I have now watched all of the Daniel Craig movies except for Quantum of Solace. And then I went
Which is not worth watching anyway.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And then I went back and watched one movie from each of the others. One from...
what the fuck, y'all?
Well, from
listeners.
You did a Pierce Brosnan one, right? You did GoldenEye.
I watched a Pierce Brosnan. I watched a Roger Moore, and I watched a...
Sean Connery.
Sean Connery, thank you. Yeah.
Goldfinger.
Teddy, were you there for all of this?
Almost all of it. I missed the
Good
Roger
Lord.
Moore one.
Okay, follow-up question.
You also weren't here for Spectre.
True.
Yeah.
Did you watch A View to a Kill?
No, I didn't.
So that's not the Roger Moore one you watched? Okay.
I watched The Spy Who Loved Me. But look, when I say watched, I kind of fell asleep halfway through, and then I kind of left the room while the rest of it finised. Those movies are...
Okay,
we can get into
have
that,
we just started, or do you need to do like an official start? Because this is blowing my fucking tiny ass mind.
Well, no, I mean, if you want to talk about, if we want to talk a little bit about like the franchise as a whole, we can go ahead and do some of that, and then I can introduce the movie. No Time to Die. We can dive in. So
so I would argue. Well, you know what? Let me back up because I have absolutely no skin in this game. I would posit that No Time to Die really is one of the rare Bond films in which it is crucial to have more than a passing sort of, familiarity with the Bond universe, because I think so much of what happens in this film is about dismantling certain things to then pave the way for whatever future iterations are to come, recognizing that what has come before will no longer track. And I'm not saying it's successful in every way. I'm not even saying that it's a worthy project, and I'm not saying that the film is incomprehensible. I'm not trying to suggest that. So, put your Twitter fingers away, audience, if you're about to argue with me about that. But I do think part of what director Cary Joji Fukunaga is doing and the writers are doing in this is about saying, like, we are not only saying goodbye to Daniel Craig as Bond, but we are saying goodbye to a certain version of Bond. Like, we're never going to get 60s era Bond again. We're not even going to get 70 or 80s Bonds again. And, God help you if you think like the sort of 90s Bond is coming back. Like, you're going to get the, espionage action, hero you deserve for the times. And you need to recognize that the times have changed a bit. Does that mean it's progressive, the version? No.
I don't know. So I don't agree with the specific words you're saying, but I don't think I don't think we disagree.
I appreciate your spirit, but I do not agree with the words.
I don't think we actually disagree. I think that you're just phrasing it in a way that isn't meshing with how I'm thinking about it, because like the Daniel Craig era of these five Bond movies are very different from every other Bond movie. And so I think instead of you saying that the last movie is like say goodbye to blah blah blah, I think that these five movies are the like James Bond we have rebooted this franchise to be more serious. So that's one of the things that and
I'm saying that this fifth one is like the sort of final farewell to a certain kind of Bond. I'm not saying that it's doing something radically different from the pre. Well, no, I do think it is doing something radically different from the previous.
Well, for folks who aren't as familiar with James Bond, like me 4 days ago, whatever. We all kind of it's in the ethos, right? So, or the ether. Sorry, not the ethos. Jesus, stupid. It's fine. And especially now that I'm going back and watching them, like they're fucking campy, right? Like they're super misogynist and deeply racist and all of the things that we know about the James Bond franchise, but they're just really, really campy in a way that like the Daniel Craig movies are not at all, except for like a couple of puns here and there. And with one caveat that I want to get into with regards to the way that the villains are characterized. But there's something interesting about the fact that like we are in this media making rebooting time where everything has to be very serious, right? And so I think you can see this trend happen with superhero movies, right? You've got like, you know, the original Batman or like the Michael Keaton Batmans are, you know, they're fun and like a little bit campy and cheesy, right? Like not totally, but a little bit, way more than what Christopher Nolan did with like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight and all of those. And I think that transition became just what you did, and that's probably swept up into this version of James Bond. Now, what I kind of want to put out there, or what I've been grappling with a little bit, is like, would an audience today accept that over-the-top, campy Bond, right? If it was rebooted back to that original style, like, I don't think audiences are primed, because we have now been conditioned to be like, oh, serious, you know, whatever. Yeah. And one more thing to add to all of this is we can't forget about Austin Powers, which I think is actually really important here to cement that, like, it was almost the death of the like cheesy Bond. Like it was like, oh, this is the extreme of that really campy comedy piece of James Bond. Like you don't want to fall into that territory because we are like serious now about
I don't think I would disagree that Austin Powers represented any sort of real viable threat to like the world or the presentation of James Bond. I think like what you're sort of pointing to is like James Bond's campiness, you know, was not something that audiences of the time were unaware of. Nor do I think it's something that perhaps audiences wouldn't take today. But I do think like we're having different conversations about masculinity. There are always different fashions of masculinity that are in vogue. So, you know, I do think like there's a sort of natural, I don't want to like say progression, because that you know, would imply that like there's some sort of like teleological, like we're heading towards an endpoint, we're getting better and better. But I do think that, you know, there is sort of like a natural sort of like change that happens with our media, and things go in and out of fashion. I don't think like the James Bond franchise is in any real danger, to be honest. I think there's a lot of hand-wringing about it, but I think this sort of movie in which white men reassure themselves that ultimately they are the ones with the like hands on the steering wheel of culture, society, and, you know, global politics will never go out of vogue as long as like white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy is the currency of the day, you know? Like I don't think James Bond is in any danger. Even if James Bond, you know, is not played by a white man, which, you know, I'm of the, you know, camp that says like, no, I don't want you know, black female 007, you know? And then I was like, well, I don't know, Lashana Lynch was dope, but like, I want her to have something else, you know? Like, you know, you almost changed my mind. You almost got me, but...
I think these are two different conversations, though. I think there's a conversation about how to represent masculinity, and there's a question of tone, right? So you can be campy and not misogynist. That is possible.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that, you know... I don't think we're talking at cross purposes here. I just want to suggest. I don't think
so either. I think that there's a lot to dig in around masculinity here, but I just think that like we don't have a lot of mainstream campy media, and I just think audiences aren't like. I'm just reflecting on the change and evolution of these characters that are in our consciousness, that have been around forever, that have transformed, and the current iterations of storytelling right now is that.
I do feel like the one place where these kind of two salient points dovetail and combine for me is like in the way that the Daniel Craig Bond series looks to really like investigate what does killing people do to his soul? What does his ability to trust, his ability to love? And while that's like a tonal thing that is particular to this series of movies, it also is kind of doing that thing of like, oh, man has to actually try to become like self-aware and think about emotions, which are like very against any behaviors that previous Bonds would really get involved in the series. So maybe there is something there where they're interacting with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the more recent Bonds have put sort of the audience hypocrisy at center stage in ways that perhaps previous Bond films have not. So when, like, Anita, when you were joking about M, calling Bond a misogynist dinosaur, right? Like, I do think there is something about the Daniel Craig movies that says, like, oh, this argument that you're making about a man like Bond and a figure, like a legend like Bond, that he's a misogynist dinosaur. He absolutely is. But in the world that you have constructed, this sort of person is necessary. Like, you have instituted the rules of this world such that this is the man that is required for the job. And so there is something incredibly hypocritical about the people in the film, or the audience suggesting that, like, oh, we want, latter day, imperialist, fantasy, wank fest, but we want it to be couched in, like, a more progressive masculinity. Like, fuck off. No, you got to be honest about what you want and about what it takes to bring that sort of thing about.
Well, let's dive into the most current movie, because I think that we can
now that 20 minutes have gone by.
Well, we can get into, like, specific examples of some of the stuff that we're talking about and how it manifests in this latest one. So the latest offering in the iconic James Bond franchise hits screens this month, and it's both exactly what you expect for a film series that's built around pervasive male fantasies of power, sex, tech, and unassailable cool. But No Time to Die, directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga and co-written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, is also radically different from everything we've seen before in these movies. Just shout out, Phoebe Waller-Bridge actually came on to clean up and spruce up the she was like a sort of last ditch come make this script better person on this, which I think is delightful.
I don't.
She's because she's amazing. I don't know what
she is amazing, but I felt like I could see her fingerprints on parts of the script and some of the jokes, and I just thought, man, these are not landing for me, but we'll get into it.
Interesting. All right, cool. So yeah, let's do this. Let's talk about the movie.
Yes.
Please, someone start.
So one thing I wrote in the script, we're going to be able to spoil, right? Like, if you haven't seen the movie, and if that's going to bother you to be spoiled, because there are spoilerific things that happen that have a bearing on the franchise, then just, press pause, come back to it once you've seen the movie. So one of the things that I was thinking of, obviously, when I said, oh, there's something radically different that happens in this movie, is we see Bond die.
Yeah, we do.
In this film. And it wasn't like an emotional gut punch for me. Like I said, I have no skin in this game. But I was like, okay, there is something crucially different about this. Because part and parcel of the James Bond fantasy has been his sort of, immortality, right? The fact that he is always able to get out of the most ludicrous, traps and schemes of the villains. Like, that's part of what we love about him. The way that he can outpunch, outthink, outmaneuver all of the villains. And so to see him sort of like accept his demise and, his literal retirement is something incredibly different. And I walked out being like, whoa, okay, so what does this mean? For the series? We know they're not going to shut it down. This ship is like $1 billion franchise. They're not letting this go.
Yeah, so, you make a good point about it. Like, there's this weird tension for me in the entire Daniel Craig series between, and you've both kind of touched on this already, of like what Bond is as an IP, and like, why the fuck are we even making this a Bond movie if it's not going to have gadgets and fancy locations and, like, big set pieces and whatever the hell all the gadgets and stuff of Bond, and then them trying to make it like serious and about humanity and like and taking a closer look at this human being. And like, for me, so I guess we were like starting at the end and working backwards, like the death, but like you kind of already mentioned it, Ebony, like it didn't work for me because I'm like, I mean, you already said, it's like, we know they're not going to fucking shut it down. And we know that the answer is it doesn't actually matter. They're just going to bring the series back in 5 years with a new Bond. And they're not going to have to be like, how do we write our way out of this problem? Like the movies before Craig never were really serialized, so they'll just have a new Bond. It'll just be someone. Their name will be James Bond.
I don't have this problem. I didn't mind that like that. It was fine for me, and also like I don't know. I guess I'm just confused about like they're going to bring back another franchise with a different cast of characters and a different Bond, and like they're going to do a whole new type of story. So like it doesn't really matter that he dies because they're just going to reboot it anyways.
That's kind of what I mean. Is I didn't have a problem with the fact they killed him for this story.
Oh, okay.
I think it made sense, and we could talk about that in its own context. But as like it relates to the Bond world and what it means to kill Bond, it didn't mean as much to me as maybe.
Yeah, and so it felt kind of like a cheat in a way, like you're asking for this to have some sort of heft that it doesn't earn, because I know that there's going to be another iteration of this. I'm also interested in not only Daniel Craig, because I mean, like he was vocal about this being his last one, and I don't even think he wanted to do this one, but contractually was obligated to do it. But we also see M really struggling to, rationalize what he's done during the course of his career in this film. And so I'm like, okay, how do you redeem a figure like M? So is this the end of Ralph Fiennes as M? Are we bringing on like a new M? Felix Leiter, Jeffrey Wright, his character dies. And so I was like, is this like the beginning of like a complete pivot? Are we getting, like with Daniel Craig, an entirely new are we going to get an entirely new cast for this? And I mean, I have to be honest, like I love Naomi Harris, but it is criminal what they did with her for Moneypenny. Like we see her as like this badass field agent, like we're introduced to her that way. And then she decides, no, ultimately I'm not the kind of person who can take the shot. So it can be a desk job. Get the fuck, like, are you shitting me? Every time I saw her sitting at that desk, just waiting for Bond to show up so that, they could flirt a little bit. I just wanted to kick something, like I wanted Lashana Lynch and, Moneypenny to like elope and, be like, fuck this. Why are we working with these white dudes anyway? The only one we care about is Q. Q, get your boyfriend. We're bouncing. Like, fuck this.
One of the things that I think is I don't particularly give a shit one way or another, but I don't think they're going to reboot it with new character. I think they're going to restart it like they do with the Spider-Man movies, right? You just restart it from the beginning, so to speak. Because the thing is, like, and having gone back and watched all these movies, the narratives and the villains are always the same. Like the storyline is always the same. The story is not what is people find interesting about James Bond. They want to see explosions and spy shit and like womanizing.
Right. No, I don't mean that like we'll have like M dies as a character or Felix Leiter does. I mean like, are you going to also recast? So there'll be no continuity.
Yeah,
from this franchise.
Teddy and I were talking about that too. Is like, will they keep some of these people? Will it just be a whole new cast entirely? Like who fucking knows?
Yeah, I don't remember.
But, I'm wondering if I don't think we
cast
should
everyone much younger.
What?
I said I'm thinking like part of what is so interesting about this film is how much older Daniel Craig looks in this film, to the point where like every time he was a scene with what's her name, his love interest, the woman he couldn't have, mother of his child, whatever, I was like, dude, that looks like your daughter. It looks fucked up, whatever, right? So obviously we're gonna get someone younger. We're not gonna get some dude in his mid-50s for this role. So I'm wondering if they will also cast younger for
well, they might do that. Yeah, they might do that for some of that too, so that they can age them over the next 5 contractual movies or whatever. But anyways, I want to get back into like this movie itself a little bit, or like the representations in it. So one of the things that I found frustrating is okay, so Q, we have one teeny tiny little speck of queerness that shows up where Q's like, I'm on a date. He's going to come over soon. Like that was it. Like, how dare you interrupt my date? That is this theoretical thing that's happening. That feels a lot like that sort of Star Wars, like the 2 women kissing at the end of the last Star Wars movie where you're like, fuck you. Like, why are you even, don't give us this bullshit. But it also reminded me, like, in contrast to the queer coding of villains is something really common in Bond films and in the Daniel Craig universe. So you've got, in this one, Rami Malek's character is definitely queer coded. And then you have Javier Bardem in Skyfall, who is also deeply queer coded. There's even that scene, which is another sort of like I don't even want to call it a nod to queerness because that's insulting, but where he's like Javier's character, whose name I can't remember, is like looking at the bullet wounds in James Bond's chest, and he starts like rubbing his chest like very provocatively and sexually, and he makes a comment about like we could have fun together, or like it could be your first time with a man. Like he doesn't say it that explicitly, but that's what he's saying. And James goes, "How do you know it's my first time?" Or like it's not my first time, or something like that, right? So I find it really frustrating that like they do this whole reboot, but they can't have any like actual evolution to like the world and the people in the world, really, right? Because it is so centered around this like womanizing white dude, and even the extra characters don't get any kind of extra love life or anything.
Well, I mean, no one ever does in the Bond movies, right? Like if anyone's getting laid, it's Bond. If anyone is perceived as being attractive, it's Bond. You know, like. Yeah. Like no one else gets it. I want to go back to what you were saying about queer coding, though, because I don't know that I agree.
Okay. Well, that's why I wanted to get into that, like why it's so frustrating to me, because I think that these villains are queer coded in these ways that like undermine any like potential progress they're trying to make, which isn't anything, right? But feel free to disagree.
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree that Javier Bardem in Skyfall is coded in really fucked up ways. And I liked Skyfall as a film, but there's some really like weird shit going on with the way that that he's presented. But I don't know that Rami Malek is queer coded. So I guess it's not that I disagree, but I would want you to just like tease out for me exactly what you mean by queer coding in this film, and then the other villains that you see this way. Because I don't, for instance, feel that like Mess Mikkelsen in Casino Royale.
No, I don't either.
Is queer coded.
I don't know. I didn't say all of them, but like these two stuck out to me as, and both in movies that do have a bit of a like a teeny tiny little reference. So I think that there is, in a mainstream film like this, having like the villain, first of all, the villains are like Rami Malek's character is like very soft spoken, kind of effeminate. Like he has this, you know, like there's a thing around the accents, right? Because it's not like you have like a Canadian villain ever, right? It's like they have to be German.
I have
Russian
a Canadian villain.
Me? Adorable. And so I think that there is a like a delicateness to that character. They're like the sort of like visual aesthetics and the way that he presents, you know, isn't immediately like, oh, you are gay. But there is I think that if we went down like a list of queer coding kind of visual and sort of auditory cues, I would categorize him in that way. So anyways, that's why I would put him in that. And I think that like, you know, anyways, I just find it really frustrating. And I think also too that like the tiny bit of campiness that does come out in these movies is coming out in the villains. So like even with Dave Bautista's villain in Spectre, he's like super over the top fucking wrestler dude, you know, like I think that that's where they're like, oh, we can go to extremes with these characters. And it's kind of troubling that it is with the villains, right? So you have someone like Rami Malek, who is Middle Eastern, or actually North African, he's Egyptian, right? And like, that sucks. Like, I was like, that sucks. Like, why did you make your villain Arab? Like, are you fucking serious right now?
It all feels like the frustration of like the dregs that they're the crumbs that they're tossing, like of queerness, like, and it tracks that they do that with villains. It reminds me of like the DC thing where they're like, oh, DC heroes don't go down on people like in sex. But it was specifically the heroes. It's like, well, villains can do it, but heroes are the linchpin, and we're still held back by like whatever.
I didn't know that. That's fucking hilarious.
Yeah. But like, it makes me wish that they could go a little further, because there were like another interesting nod that we saw. I don't know if this was just reading into it, was like the gaze that they've always done more on Daniel Craig on his body than any other Bond. And there's this one shot in this movie of like very clearly like the camera is dick level and thigh level.
Wild.
When he's driving this boat, and it's just this great shot of like, yeah, we know some of you want this, and here it is. Yeah. And like it's going back to the tension of like the things that you think about from Bond and what they kind of have to keep it Bond, and the tension between trying to update that. It makes you want like, well, Bond can still be very sexual and have it be about sex, but just like in a way that's not misogynist. And like, it would be so nice if like if there was like a very sex positive view of Bond instead of what I think this movie struggles with in particular, which is pulling itself back from having him be misogynist, but also then kind of desexualizing sometimes.
Well, I would also argue, though, that those shots are objectifying and not in the direction that we want in the world. Like, it's not like I don't want equal opportunity objectification where we're like, well, cool, if we can't objectify women, let's objectify them, like the superheroes. And also, like, how do we do that in a way that isn't predicated on patriarchy or built into patriarchy, right? How do we like show sexuality in a way that is like healthier and not tied into these like really troubling oppressive constraints, right? And like, what does that mean? Like, you know, the way that men's bodies are shown or like quote unquote sexualized is also very different, right? In terms of like, look at my big rippling muscles and I'm like powerful. Like, it's not a seductive thing in the same way that it is when it usually is with women.
Yeah, I mean,
although I thought it was fucking hilarious that we fully saw like this huge package. I was like, was that stuffed? Like, what was happening?
Oh my God, Anita asking the questions that the audience demands. Do y'all remember when Daniel Craig, like when Casino Royale first came out, and there was this famous op-ed, I think it might have been in The Guardian, The Independent, I can't remember, but it was this older white male British writer, of course, who was like so upset at Daniel Craig's physicality and how, you know, like muscular and defined he was. And he was like, you know, the ways in which, you know, men used to look on camera, you know, is no longer enough. You know, like men have to spend all this time in the gym, you know, and it was this like toddler tantrum about men, you know, having to go through what they have to go through to be considered like attractive or powerful in contemporary media. Not, you know, as a way to say like, hey, this is unhealthy for anyone of any gender. But like, in particular, it was like, the guy was like, I liked the older version of, you know, cool guys. And his versions were all like dudes who like smoked, you know, and we're just kind of like, whatever. It was hilarious, you know? And so there is something to this idea that like Daniel Craig's version of Bond looks physically capable of doing some of the absolutely absurd stuff that he is called upon to do in this movie. And Lashana Lynch is too, by the way, like such a dope actor. Even though what they have her do, again, so fucking irritated because, you know, she's constantly like needling Bond. She's like, yo, what up? I'm the new 007. Get used to it, you know, cry to your mom, whatever, right? But then the film ultimately has her like slowly tamp down on that delicious like bitchiness, you know, and she slowly starts to like cede authority to Bond to the point where she actually is like, give his 007 designation back to him. And I'm like, girl, what you doing?
I thought all of those jokes were going to be like, she's going to be the next Bond. Like that they're like just dropping those crumbs. To
ain't no way. No way. Not only are they not giving this job to a black woman, they giving it to a dark-skinned black woman with short hair. Sure. Anita, quit living on dream time.
Totally. 100%. I agree with you. But I still was like, oh, what? Maybe. But then they literally had her like be like, no, this is yours. And you're like, fuck.
I was so mad. So mad.
Yeah. I do want to talk about gender a little bit here because so I felt like this movie was less frustrating to me than I expected it to be because there wasn't as much womanizing, because it is a part of that storyline of like Bond is getting like, he is learning to trust. He is getting older. He is trying to settle down. Like he fell in love, blah, 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 blah. Now that I know the origin story of their relationship, they fucked once and then she's like, I love you. I'm like, wait, that's it? That's the whole.
Oh, with Vesper?
Yeah. That's the whole goddamn. No, not Vesper. The woman, the blonde chick.
Okay.
I can't remember her name.
Yo, listen, just for Vesper Lind, who was so dope. But
she's
whatever.
Great. I loved her in the role. I thought she was lovely. But that I felt like, you know, made it feel slightly less garbagey for me because there wasn't as much of that bullshit womanizing. But something I've noticed is, so I think when we talk about violence against women here, there's like, it's it's not complicated, but there's like violence against female villains who are equally competent, and therefore that is not violence against women, right? That is just like combating with somebody of equal prowess. Usually those women are sexualized, and that's gross, but that's a different conversation. There is this thing where the Bonds will be very physically aggressive with their love interests. And so there is a scene at the beginning of this movie where, what is her fucking name? I feel like we've all referenced her. I can't remember her name. Madeleine. She when he thinks that she betrayed him, he grabs her and shakes her and like pushes her, right? And I saw this in another movie too, where he does this to another woman who he's like, you did the bad thing. We just fucked, but now I'm going to be violent with you. And I feel like those little bits were really troubling to me because they're so minor, right? They're like a blip that you could pass by, and it just perpetuates this like, well, he was justified in his male physical rage because she betrayed him, right? And there's no like, there's no punishment for that. There's no like of course not, because the model of masculinity that he perpetuates is like Teflon tough guy, like you whatever. And so I wanted to just surface that because I found it really frustrating and saw it happen a couple of times in some of the other movies as well. So
gosh,
it's interesting how like. I mean, we were bemoaning a different scene in this movie, which is like the long staircase military gun shooty scene.
So boring.
Like every time, we're seeing sometimes the tension of them trying to pull back on like the not sexuality, but like the misogyny. But like they won't pull back on violence, or they can't, or they don't know how. It's just like, no, he's gonna fucking murder everybody. But we're gonna make sure that you see that it makes it hard for him. It's so hard for he has trouble sleeping sometimes. That 100th head he shot.
I don't know. Bond is what Bond is, but I want more gadgets, right? Like that got completely, it basically gets cut out, and it becomes kind of a like, this is legacy, so we have to include a thing. But I want more like the spy work, right? The like going, like sneaking into a place and having all of the different gadgets. And Bond has become these big action set pieces crammed together with a really stupid story, right? Like, and some of the action was good and some of it wasn't. Like, I loved the opening scene on the bridge where he dives under that tiny little like nook in the wall or whatever. Like, there's some of it that I thought was lovely, but some of it, like you were saying, that military one was awful, and like I don't know, it gets boring.
One that I loved. And we haven't talked about some of the other people who are in the film. Someone who I wanted to see 2 more hours worth of, Ana de Armas as Paloma.
Yeah.
I get what's going on there with like, sexy woman, sexy younger woman. She's dope. She's a killer, even in her evening gown. Look at the way she does these very like balletic poses as she, like dispatches people. Nevertheless, I find that actor so charming that I loved, the way she sort of like spins on a dime. And so the way that she is playing coy initially with Bond, and he just accepts it like, oh, I've only been at this job 3 weeks and then reveals like, no, I do know what the fuck I'm doing here. I'm actually incredibly good. Plus I just thought it was really well shot. I mean, like director Cary Joji Fukunaga, dude can shoot the hell out of a movie, a TV show. Like, he knows how to do the shots, He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Before we dig into it, because I know we're going to have shit to say about that whole sequence, but like, yeah, credit where credit is due. That shot, the shot downward when she's on the floor and she like is like the hands of a clock and she shoots like 3 different people at these like really dramatic angles.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Like, as I know I was just shit talking violence, but, like,
but make it look good.
Yeah, make it look good. Yeah. Do you want to say something else about that? The Illuminati scene.
Oh, well, no. I mean, like, we talked about how Phoebe Waller-Bridge, like, punched up the script. That felt like one of those places where that whole sequence was a little confusing, where it was like they introduced this character and what they're doing, and she's got the revealing dress on, but, like, they very explicitly are like, but they're not going to have sex with each other because that's not what Bond does, and she's way too young, so we're not going to do that, even though we're doing that elsewhere.
And even though that's 100% what they would have done.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
They're just like, we are not, like, I was reading some stuff where they're like, we can't do things that the old Bond used to do, like some of the women stuff and smoking cigarettes. Like, fuck off.
But I don't know. It's so strange that it was good that they didn't have him just like have them have sex or whatever. But like, And it was kind of funny that he assumed they were going to, and she was like, no.
Yeah.
But it was just it felt so weird that sequence even happened in the Bond movie. It felt like they were trying to give themselves, it was an award for good boys. It was like, look, we're gonna put this character on screen, but we're not gonna touch, and so we're doing a good job. It's like,
good job,
and then she's just gone
everybody.
because then she just evaporates. As a woman would in the Bond movies after he has sex with her, except they just don't do the sex part, and then she's gone.
Yeah, and that's why Lashana Lynch makes it to, the end, because she doesn't. We think she's, just this cool woman, picking Bond up on her scooter. Surprise! Wig reveal. Bitch, I'm 007.
Yeah.
So good. So good.
All right. Any final thoughts?
Before we go, can we just talk about, just the last thing for me.
Yeah.
The fact that James Bond is literally toxic to the people he purports to click. I was like, this is so on the nose. I can't even believe it. I love it. Like, white male masculinity in its current form will literally kill itself and any of the people around it. I was like, I love it. I don't know who's responsible for this, but that's kudos. Beautiful. I salute you.
I want to believe that was Phoebe. Phoebe. Yeah, that is so good, Ebony.
Yeah. So I was so pleased.
But here's the reality is it doesn't fucking matter because the whole movie praises toxic masculinity. And then you know what I mean? Like, these are those things where we're reading this, when you're not reading into it, it literally it's actual literally there. But it's a frustrating kind of thing where you're like, cool, we just witnessed spectacular toxic masculinity this whole way through. And, I find it really, I'm sure I've talked about this before. I find it really frustrating because the confident arrogance of Bond is so appealing because of the culture that we live in. So the moment, like, I definitely laughed at various moments where he was like being a dick to someone in his like confident swagger. And then I'm like, fuck, why am I laughing at that? Like, that's not okay to be that way. But it's framed as this comedy and this like swagger that is appealing,
Yeah.
It's very seductive.
It's so seductive.
A final button I want to add about this movie, like on a different topic, is just that on the subject of tensions and stuff, something that has like, you were talking about gadgets and you want more gadgets. And I've always wanted that from the Craig movies because it felt like they went further and further away. And like, especially Skyfall, which is a beautiful film, but felt the least Bondy because it was so far away from all that fun stuff. So when they did do stuff like this in this movie, I did appreciate, like, the fucking bionic eye, and he calls the person Cyclops, and like the dumb hacking stuff where Q is like, wait, there's hidden files, and then like the UI pops up and it says hidden files. I'm like, thank you. Like, that shit is so dumb, and I'm glad it was there.
There was actually not so many, but there was like a bunch of weird similarities from GoldenEye to this one with like the Russian hackers and then the one person who defects and then the other woman. I honestly, these movies are so messed up in my brain that I'm just like, what?
I haven't seen GoldenEye in so long, but I remember loving it.
It's really rough.
Speaking, but real quick, sorry, last thing. Scandinavian crime procedural shout out. The guy who plays the Russian dude scientist in this movie pops up in so much Scandinavian crime drama. David Densick. Like, I think dude is either Swedish. I think he's Swedish. No, he's Danish. Whatever. Dude is in Norwegian, Swedish, Danish. He's in all them shits. And so when I saw him on the screen, I just relaxed even further back in my seat. And I'm like, I'm going to love this.
He was funny.
Yeah.
He was really entertaining. Except for that weird, like, I'm going to kill all the black people line.
Listen,
like, what the
shit was incomprehensible. The plot of this thing, honestly, incomprehensible.
We did not talk about the fact that the villain motivation made no sense. And also, what was he doing? I don't know. This might be bonus territory. The other thing I want to point out, though, in relation to visuals is the scene where Bond and Madeleine go to see Bluford and that fucking box that comes pulling in.
Wait, Blofeld?
Oh, Blofeld. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was hilarious.
Oh, yes.
The cube thing?
Yeah. Very Magneto in the first X-Men movie.
Yes, so good.
All right, y'all. We will be right back.
Hey there, podcast family. While you're enjoying the show today, why not head on over to Patreon and sign up to be part of the crew that makes the magic happen? That's right. When you become a subscriber, you offer us the help we need to keep making the show. So moonwalk on over to patreon.com/femfreak and sign up today. And now, back to the show.
What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Ebony, what are you freaking out about?
It's a small freak out, but in addition to our somewhat spooky movie watching we'll be doing throughout the month of October for the pod, I like horror, so I've been watching stuff, on my own. And I, for whatever reason, never watched The Descent, even though I had heard so many wonderful things about it, just about like how it was just like a masterpiece of tension, how they did so much really interesting stuff because the film is all women. And so the story loosely is that this group of friends gets together to go on like an adventure sort of expedition. They've gone white river rafting, they've gone mountain climbing. It's the kind of women who do these sorts of things. None of them is new to this. And they are going to go caving. At the start of the movie, it's a year after the traumatic death of the husband and daughter of one of the women who's participating. And so they go caving in what they discover is an unexplored caving system, I think in North Carolina. It's weird because most of the women on this trip are European. Like there's 2 Scottish women, an Irish woman. I don't know. It's weird. Like there's no sort of explanation as to who people are and why they made this particular trip, whatever. Anyways, they go to this cave. There's a cave in. They have to try and find a way out. And then there are scary things living down there. They have to try and stay alive. It is so gross. But it was really interesting. Like I said, I had heard about how good this movie was, and it was good. But I wish I had seen it when it came out, which I think was 2005, because I've seen so many things since then that I think kind of resonated, rung my bell a little bit harder. And I'm not convinced that the all-female cast, that they were doing anything particularly interesting. In fact, to my mind, that's not enough to simply have like all women instead of a cast of men and women or whatever in a horror flick and think that you've done something. I don't know that there's anything like super interesting being done on that front. The one thing that I think is interesting, and I won't spoil it for people in case you want to watch it, but there is a UK ending and then there's a US ending. And I encourage you to watch the film. You can see it, I think, like if you get and get like that free trial of Shout TV on Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free right now. Watch the ending and then go to Wikipedia and read what the alternate ending was and ask yourself, okay, why does the US get this ending? And why does everyone else get this other ending? Like, what does that say about American movie audiences and what they believe we can handle?
I was about to be like, cool, thanks for a recommendation. Definitely not going to watch that. But now I'm really curious about these endings.
And I would say this, the film, for me, this is just personal taste. The film for me suffers from that style of filmmaking in which, in an effort to let the audience experience some of the like spatial disorientation that the characters experience, you don't see what's happening on screen. And I get it, they're in a fucking cave, but you don't see what's going on and you're never aware of what's really happening, who's who, whatever. And so I never felt quite as invested and immersed in the world as I could have because I simply did not know what was going on, And I do think the experience would have been different if I were in a dark theater, maybe, with like that kind of immersive sound, because that all contributes to how we, understand a film. But even watching it on my, huge screen TV at home, I was just like, I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know what I'm hearing. And I was never shown what happened. So I don't know. I felt it one remove from it. Anita, I'm not sure you'll like it.
Yeah, I don't.
I would say just go read the Wikipedia summary. I don't think it's for you. Just read the Wikipedia summary and then let's talk about those 2 endings.
Cool. All right. Teddy, you freaking out about anything?
Yeah, I feel like this is my third time on the show. Thanks for having me. And every time my freakouts are always like not about anything to do with media. It was like, I want to talk about dating apps. So this time I'm going to continue to disappoint because I'm really obsessed with this law I just learned about called copyright reversion. So like I find copyright interesting because I work in the creative, capitalized arts and creative entertainment. And so there's a lot of like interesting stuff as it relates to money and big business and late stage capitalism and trying to make art. So like a lot of people know, for example, that there is the law where 70 years after a creator dies, the work falls into the public domain. That is an amount of time that keeps getting pushed further and further back as we get further and further from the death of Walt Disney. Because people may also know that like Disney drives a lot of the copyright law, and copyright law is very utilitarian for the people with money. As a lot of law is. But copyright reversion is really interesting. Copyright reversion says 35 years from the creation of a work, which is way faster, not the death of the creator, but just the creation of the work, that creator can apply to take back their copyright. So if they, for example, in the simplest example, are an author of a book and they've given like a lifetime publishing deal to some huge publishing house, they can just take it back. It doesn't matter what the contract says. They're just allowed to do this. And it's something that was put in place to protect artists and creators so that probably when they released that in the first place, they didn't have any bargaining power. And if they've made something that's been successful, they can be like, hey, actually, if you want to keep making money off of this, then you have to pay me again or renegotiate with me. So it's coming up because the estates of a lot of classic Marvel character writers have sued Disney and are in courts, I believe, like the estates of Stan Lee and other people are trying to get those characters like Iron Man taken away from Disney. Anyway, this is ringing bells for me. I don't have much more to say about it, except that I find it fascinating because 35 years is about the age of what we know as the video game industry. So we're going to start to get into like, it's way more complicated because video games are collaborative and there's multiple people involved in it. But it is something that could start to come up in like 5 to 10 years. And I would love to see big companies lose their IP.
Yeah, same. The minute you said you were going to freak out about copyright reversion, I was like, they're going to bring it to Disney. I'm going to bring it to Disney.
Yeah, take their shit back. I want Ubisoft to lose all their IP. I want EA. I want Blizzard to lose their IP. Not because I want those projects to be, I mean, this is very in line with like the be critical of the media you love. It's like, I like all those things. I just want the companies that are profiting to like have to pay their.
Well, I think also what you're bringing up is really interesting in terms of like who owns games, right? In terms of the like, it's not like an author being like, I'm going to take my book back from a publisher. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And then can you like, I mean, getting even more down the rabbit hole, could somebody like say it's an indie studio and the like creative director of the studio owns the IP? Yeah. Could the workers be like, in 35 years, I want a piece of this shit?
That's exactly what's being established right now by the latest lawsuit, because the successes that have happened recently, like I think the author of the Babysitter's Club series took back all like 100 plus books from her publisher.
Damn.
But yeah, that's like, for example, with the comic creators, that was work made for hire. That wasn't they wrote something and sold it to a publisher. That was like they were paid to do that. So they were employees and they're just workers. They're air quotes, just workers. So yeah, like this isn't something that will easily happen. And copyright reversion doesn't happen automatically. You have to like apply and go through an obnoxious process. But it would be curious to see what that looks like if someone could like, especially if there were unions involved. Like
what?
Imagine
unions, you say?
Yeah, then a union could represent the entire body because yeah, it is very, very hard to figure out who would own the IP on a game like Assassin's Creed where it's hundreds of people working on it. And like, yeah, there's like the creative director or the writers or whatever, but there's a lot more to an IP than that. And if it's made like a group, maybe it could be owned by a group or negotiated through an entity, some sort of entity that might represent all the workers and their ownership of their work. Because imagine being the people, like somebody fucking, started these characters, right? Like I don't care about Assassin's Creed, but I'm using it as an example because I want Ubisoft to lose it. But like, who designed that fucking outfit with the hood and the jacket? Like some character designer or a series of character designers that has gone on to be like sold by a million nerd shops and like emulated and like all of the series, 15 years later now are still using those designs with the assassins. It's like, that person should totally be able to be like, hey, pay me more or give me some sort of bonus for doing that.
This is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Thanks for listening.
It is your tech knowledge, woes. Tech little blips of information is very welcome in our Freakouts. So keep them coming.
Do you have any lawyers who are well-versed in copyright who could come on and be a guest on a podcast and just break it down for us? Like, here's what's going to happen in movies. Here's what's going to happen in books. Here's what's going to happen in music and whatever. Because it is fascinating.
I know several lawyers from back when I did fair use stuff. I don't know if they can break it down to that level of detail, but that shit is super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all. If you want to submit your own freak out about tech or anything else, please do at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio, and thank you, Teddy, so much for coming on and talk with us about James Bond. No, I'm going to save it for the bonus. You are all going to have to listen to the bonus to know what I was about to say. Teddy, where can people find out more about you?
People can follow me on social media things. I'm Teddy Dief everywhere. TEDDYDIEF. They can also find the band OFK. That's the virtual band I'm making a game about on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever they listen to music.
OFK. Go download that shit. And also Twitch. Do you do Twitch?
I do Twitch sometimes. Yeah. OFK Band. We are OFK Band everywhere for socials if you want to hang out with the band.
Go follow all those things.
Yeah.
We'll be back next time to get back into our somewhat spooky series this October with Madres, which is a new horror movie coming out on Amazon Prime. Our show is engineered by Rob Parra. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.